On Saturday night against the Spurs, Dillon Brooks was doing Dillon Brooks things, getting himself into a scuffle with Victor Wembanyama. But as I was watching this, something came to my mind. Was Dillon Brooks guarding Wemby the whole game? Turns out, yeah. The Rockets, despite playing two big men in their starting lineup, assigned Dillon Brooks to Victor Wembanyama, which looked like it didn't make much sense. If you look at the box score, Wemby scored 29 points on close to 60% shooting. But after watching this game, it was clear to me that Dillon Brooks was by far the best defender on Wemby for the simple fact that Wemby didn't want to attack him despite being a whole foot taller. The Spurs prefer to use Wemby as a ball handler and thus wanted someone that was slower and less experienced at guarding the perimeter. While Sengun matches Wemby's size, he has much slower foot speed, so he gives Wemby too much space to pull up for three. Same with Jock Landale, except he's seeing Wemby make a couple threes now, so he falls for the pump fake and then gets bullied in the paint. The Spurs really only posted up Wemby when it was someone smaller than Brooks or less experienced. Tari Eason tries to defend Wemby, but he falls for the pump fake as well, and Wemby posterizes Cam Whitmore. On this one, Wemby posts up Reed Shepherd, that immediately forces a double, and Wemby finds Castle for the dunk. So at this point, you might have noticed that Wemby wanted to attack on the perimeter against big men and in the post on smaller guards. So why couldn't Wemby post up Dillon Brooks? Brooks is simply stronger than most guards. Even when they had scuffled, Brooks had forced a jump ball that caused that kerfuffle. And the reality is that Wemby had a lot of trouble getting closer to the basket. Yes, there was some help defense, but Brooks pushed Wemby out much further than his teammates ever could. So with Brooks being able to hold his own, this opened up ways for Houston to structure their defense. With Brooks on Wemby, Paul runs pick and roll to get the switch. With a small guard on Wemby, they go to the post, but Sengun, who was having trouble guarding on the perimeter, can now guard Wemby in the post. The Spurs don't like that, so they reset, and Brooks does a good job on Paul, which leads to a rush shot at the end of the shot clock. The Spurs try this again down the stretch. Paul runs pick and roll and gets a switch, but Houston is again able to scram Van Vliet out for a bigger defender. So Paul tries attacking Brooks instead and has to settle for a fadeaway. All in all, the only issue I took with Houston's strategy was that they only let Brooks play against Wemby for about 13 to 14 minutes of this game, but luckily, these two would face off again just 2 days later. And in their second game, the Rockets made a concerted effort to mirror Brooks' minutes with Wemby, and it worked wonderfully. As anticipated, Houston knew that San Antonio wanted to get Brooks off of Wemby and get in the post, so once the Rockets switch, Adams creeps over to discourage the pass into the post. That forces the Spurs to go away from Wemby despite a good matchup, and they end up turning the ball over. So early in the second, Wemby tries to attack Brooks himself from the three-point line, but Brooks makes him pick up his dribble, and then Wemby gets ripped from behind. Then in the third, Wemby tries attacking Brooks again, but he can't get around him and has to settle for a long fadeaway jumper. Now, to Wemby's credit, he did hit some tough fadeaways over Brooks, but again, these shots are ones that any team is going to live with. He has some success in the pick and roll as a roller to shed Brooks away, but the main problem was still there. The Spurs never really figured out ways to get Wemby in strong positions to score. This was probably the easiest bucket Wemby had. The Spurs had a decoy action, so Wemby finally had Brooks one-on-one close to the basket, and of course he scores. But for a lot of that second half, a lot of possessions looked like this, where the Spurs actually went away from Wemby and elected to have other players try and attack the Rockets' weaker defenders. While the height disparity between Brooks and Wemby is clear as day, this matchup is a microcosm of Wemby's season so far. He has struggled to find his offense to start this year because he's in this weird place where he's too big to be handling the ball that often, but also too scrawny to punish physical defenders in the post. And that's why Dillon Brooks fits the mold of someone who can give a 7'6" alien so many problems. He's physical enough to hold his own and quick enough to keep up with Wemby on the perimeter. We have seen that around the league to start the season, where teams are electing to put more mobile forwards or guards on Wemby to slow him down. Yes, if you have a 7-foot mobile center, that's probably the most ideal matchup. But despite Wemby's height, teams are realizing that there are a wider range of defenders that could potentially give Wemby problems, and we'll have to see how Wemby adjusts in his second year as a pro.